Well, thanks everyone. And this is our final session of the day. Thank you to everyone if you've stayed through the entire time from the start of this morning throughout the whole SkillShare session, or if you've dropped in and out of the sessions. And just in case you don't know me, my name is Christina Winter, and I will be moderating our final session. So please join me in welcoming Emily Hopkins, the repository coordinator at the University of Saskatchewan Library. Emily will be presenting using the Harvest Upload service to advocate for sustainable open access. Over to you, Emily.
Thanks so much, Christina, and thanks everyone for having me. And thank you all for hanging in to the very end of the day. If I was there with you, I'd give you one of my repository stickers so that as your reward for being a diehard. So I appreciate you sticking it out. Yeah, so I'm Emily Hopkins. I'm here at the University of Saskatchewan, Treaty 6 and the homeland of the Métis. And this is a version of a presentation I did with Dee Dee, who you heard from earlier if you were here for the Transformative Agreements group. So Dee Dee Dawson is my colleague here at USask, along with Jacqueline. And of course, I'm also part of the CARL repositories group. You probably heard from Robin and Priscilla earlier. I was the chair of that group for its first 2 years. And I also chair the PKP Technical Committee. But today I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the real specific details of how we run the repository at USask and sort of putting that into context for everybody. So there we go. Okay. So most places either have a repository or they're working to establish one. If they haven't gotten on board yet, they're trying to figure out how to do it now. And of course, Scholaris is pretty new on the scene as well as an option for shared infrastructure that doesn't involve paying a vendor, but also doesn't involve hosting it at your own institution. But it's worth noting that institutions will still need to make their own decisions around education outreach and related services, including supporting the upload process. And of course, we're all waiting on this new tri-agency open access policy, which will likely have pretty significant implications for repositories. Okay, we've talked a lot about repositories today. You might be feeling familiar with these concepts by now, but I also feel like we can't define green open access too clearly or too often. So I'm just going to run through this really quick in terms of what's free for who when, right? So gold is free for readers at the time of publication. The most common way of doing this is charging authors a fee, an article processing charge. Diamond open access, the infrastructure is funded by a library or scholarly society, free to read at the time of publication, and free for the author to publish. And then green open access is this special kind of open access that is enabled by repositories. It's a very old and important form of open access, right? We talk about archive, people sharing physics papers in the 90s, but it's not obvious or intuitive that this is a way that you could share your work. And basically how it works is that authors can share their accepted manuscript in a repository, the author accepted manuscript. So this is after peer review, but before final publisher, copy editing, branding, or proofs. And pretty much every time I say the words accepted manuscript, I also say that accompanying phrase. It might require an embargo period or a statement from the publisher. It's free for readers. There's no subscription fee. It's free for articles. There's no article processing charge. This is an example of what one looks like in Harvest. Which is our institutional repository. It's typeset in LaTeX, not Word, so the LaTeX ones are a little prettier than the Word ones most of the time, but they still count as accepted manuscripts. And this is Harvest. This is USask's repository. It's a DSpace repository. We're running 7.6 right now, working on upgrading to 9, and we host it locally here at the university. It's been DSpace since 2018. Before that, it was eCommons. And so its role has sort of evolved since then. And we did a pilot project for mediated deposit in 2023, and then we've offered an upload service since July 2024. And so talking about upload service brings me to the topic of self-archiving versus mediated deposit, right? So a lot of repositories were originally imagined with self-archiving in mind. If we build it, they will come. Current services vary. You've heard about some other examples today from self-archiving only, maybe self-archiving with a review process or quality checks, which might also mean needing to reject or fix a submission. And some institutions already do mediated deposit for all or some of the items, or some combination of the above, and it can vary depending on item type. So the big question for all of us is, why hasn't self-archiving been more successful? Some of the most common explanations that a lot of folks will be familiar with are things like authors are lazy, authors are busy, or they'll get the hang of it with a little bit of education, right? Yeah, sure, they can't figure it out, but if we show them once, one paper will be enough. They'll get the hang of it. However, authors do complicated, time-consuming things all the time, either because they see the value or because they're forced to. So this can't be the whole explanation. Some other explanations we've observed include authors are scared of violating copyright or getting in trouble from publishers. Commercial publishers put a lot of energy and money into promoting APCs or Gold OA as the best or only form of open access. We looked at that a little bit with the transformative agreements language. It comes through in their open access policies as well, for sure. And green open access can be confusing. People worry that it's illegal, they can't find the right version, and they get nervous about embargo periods. They are more scared of publishers than they are of any other consequence. So, how do we actually get more papers? So we know authors can do complicated, time-consuming things if they're sufficiently motivated. Traditionally, we talk in terms of two kinds of motivation, right? We have carrots and sticks. So making them see the value is stuff like promoting open access. Promoting green open access is a way not to pay APCs. And then the stick is forcing them to do it. Maybe the tri-agency policy will help more with this in the future, but right now we're pretty short on this side of things for sure. And then of course, the other things that we can address, I don't think lazy, a lot of perspectives sort of antagonistic towards authors, and I don't think it's super duper helpful, even if it's true in individual circumstances. Broadly speaking, I don't think authors are lazy, but I do think that they are busy. And so we can also work to make it faster and easier and to make it less scary. And I think that the less scary is a very important one as well. Contacting authors regularly and asking for a specific version of their paper is an immediate practical thing, but it also serves as regular promotion of the repository and making sure they know their options. So it kind of reinforces all of these things. Um, Targeting individual authors as they publish specific papers is important. They're going to continue to publish even if they're too busy for other new things, right? If there's one thing that researchers are going to have to keep doing, it's publishing. And so we might as well tap into that while that's still the system that we're in. They're more likely to consider their options or understand what we are talking about in relation to a specific paper rather than the general question of how to share their work, right? I need the accepted manuscript for this exact citation rather than just like a general education thing. And then every paper shared is a win. We don't need them to be fully on board right away. And they might learn to save their accepted manuscript for next time, even if they don't have it anymore for this particular publication. That's a really important part. So we did a pilot project for this from May to October 2023. We targeted the water signature area at USask. We have different research signature areas here. We hired one graduate student assistant from that area. We deposited almost 200 items, had about 35 authors involved. And also, crucially, we had good support from like support staff at the Center for Hydrology or the Global Water Futures Grant. And so that's been a lot of what was discussed earlier with like they've set up their own website, their own way of tracking research and transferring some of that kind of ad hoc bespoke infrastructure into the repository instead is really important. And so some of our conclusions from this, just publishers are not incentivized to make green open access easy. Many times during the pilot project, our student assistant would have a question that they couldn't resolve, so they'd escalate it to me, and I'd look into it a little bit, and then I'd consult Dee our open scholarship librarian, and then she'd be like, let me get back to you. And so if we're regularly tapping into like Dee having to dig into it and figure things out, that's more than we can reasonably expect faculty members, staff to really understand. The policies are complicated and they vary a lot and they change a lot. It's not a quick and simple learning curve, so it's not surprising that authors are not confident about their rights. The regular outreach involved in offering the upload service also leads to other education and advocacy opportunities. So like sharing great literature, supporting workshops and conferences, helping labs or grants transition to sharing work in Harvest instead of their own website, talking to people about adopting Creative Commons licenses and persistent identifiers like ORCID and DOIs, and planning good research data management practices thanks to our work with Global Water Futures. When they transitioned to a new grant, Global Water Futures Observatories, they were talking to us in the library about how to plan data sharing for that new grant, which is a great connection that we were able to make that way. So then, thanks to the success of the pilot project, we were able to launch our upload service in July 2024. So this was sort of launched with 1 year of funding in mind. And so it involves myself, the repository coordinator, the open scholarship librarian, and our copyright coordinator, sort of advise as needed. There's 3 library assistants who don't spend very much time each week, but they've been trained to sort of be able to answer questions about like People send the wrong version or they have a question about the service, just so that I'm not a single bottleneck for communication about papers. And then there's 3 part-time casual graduate student assistants working 12 hours a week each, doing the permissions checking work and deposit. Um, and it's been kind of a cool way to also educate graduate students and do outreach to their areas. And they're also aware of like different workshops and conferences that we can then reach out to and offer to share their posters and that sort of thing. From the pilot project, this is Annika Basnet, one of our students. He says, I feel like I've developed a different understanding about academic publishing and licensing than before. It was an eye-opener, really, how little I knew about academic publishing, different legal restrictions, open access policy, tools and resources associated with this topic. I've learned a lot. And I found that, there's a bit of a learning curve on this, but because they go through such a high volume of papers, they end up knowing a lot about this pretty quickly. So just to break down the specifics of the workflow in a little more detail for you. Every week I get Scopus and/or Web of Science alerts, depending on which one is cooperating. And then the students review that and add which version we can share and the contact information. And then I have a mail merge template that I'll show you that fills out the author's name and the reference and which version. And then at that point, authors can fill out an authorization form. And it's a form that says yes to this paper, but also the default of it is like this and future papers. And then they can submit their files as needed. The library assistants and myself check that the correct version has been received or any back and forth as needed, then hand off to the students who upload the papers, and then the students inform the authors once that deposit is done. And this little purple bubble is sort of separate outreach to conferences, workshops, research groups, often other sources of gray literature that we're getting across campus. And so this is the template for my mail merge. It's not very glamorous, but it does the job. And there's a little variable in there. So the paragraph that says the publisher allows us to share the final version would say allows us to share the accepted manuscript with some information about that, if that was the case. But this is sort of the basics of how it looks. And then we have a spreadsheet with the other information that populates this before I send it to everybody. And then this is our authorization form. So USask uses team dynamics. So it's a team dynamics form. And this just allows them to allows us to keep on record that someone has said, yes, you can deposit things on our behalf. Because that's important for us because they're not going through the DSpace interface where they would check off the harvest license. We have to have that on record here. But we've tried to keep it as short as possible. Even so, it is too long for some folks, but we try to keep it short. Um, and so then this is a look at the journal articles added to Harvest each year from 2018 to 2025. And so this is just the articles within that year, not the total articles. So starting in 2018, when eCommons was replaced by Harvest, we then can see the impact of the mediated deposit pilot, and then the launch of the upload service late in 2024, and then the first full year of the upload service. And so, it's not super duper surprising that if we put down our heads and spend a bunch of time depositing articles that we do in fact get more, but it is still nice to see that. And so just to break things down a little bit, in 2025, we got 762 items. So this is just talking about articles in gray literature, not talking about graduate theses and dissertations. Those are an important part of our collection too. We just don't have to work to promote that because people are highly incentivized to graduate. And of these, 87% of the new items were from the upload service, the rest added by authors and support staff at 9%, and then automated publisher workflows 6%. Currently, we just have that set up with MDPI. And we have authorizations from 307 authors at USask to upload their work on an ongoing basis. And so if they're in that camp, when we get an alert that they've published something, if we already have a version we can share, we will share it and then let them know. We won't ask for permission every single time. And so this is a look at how it breaks down. So the purple there is the 143 gray literature, and then the breakdown of the articles. So 529 gold open access articles and 90 green open access articles. What I mean here is like the gold OA ones had a Creative Commons license, and then these other 90 are accepted manuscripts. Why do we bother to deposit articles that are already open access? A few reasons. We started out contacting authors only for green open access, so only for accepted manuscripts. But we actually switched after the partway through the pilot, I think, to contacting everyone, even if their final version was technically already OA. People who are currently paying APCs are an important target audience for education about accepted manuscripts, and this service is a clear way to target them. Redundancy is good. A lot of these publishers, who knows what will happen to them, having extra copies of articles in Canada can be a very good thing. And also the current forecasted future OA policy from the tri-agency is likely going to require deposit for everything. So it's nice to build that infrastructure and get everyone used to it. But basically, we also just didn't want everyone who's already paying APCs to be insulated from ever hearing about alternatives. And so 90 of these were accepted manuscripts. And so if you use the mean APC from sort of an earlier period, which was 4,600 Canadian dollars, if people had paid to make these open access, the cost of making them would have been $400,000 Canadian. Now, of course, they didn't. They put it in the repository instead. But it's still a useful way to look at like a very affordable way of making this work open access and meeting those OA requirements. As a one thing that's interesting too, communications with publishers when policies are unclear or require contacting the publisher, often for smaller publishers, we do follow through every time, even if we don't get a response or they say no. We kind of consider these specific requests on a regular basis to be a form of advocacy in themselves. And we've received several positive responses too, including publishers agreeing to update or clarify policies to encourage future sharing. We've also gotten some nice feedback from authors. Quote, "Thank you for reaching out. I've known about Harvest and wanted to use it for the last few years. I haven't had that extra push until now, however." Quote, "Thank you. I'm new to USask, so I had not heard of Harvest. I have 7 publications and you are welcome to put any of them on Harvest for which you have publisher consent." And then finally, we opted for the subscription version because we did not have funds for open access fees and would therefore like to publish our non-copy edited version in Harvest to ensure it is readily accessible. And this was tri-agency funded. And we have had a couple examples of people where we've asked for something that was already gold OA, and then later they've come back and said, we're sharing our accepted manuscript this time. So just in summary, green open access is pretty confusing and we have better odds of success if we're able to intercept people during the publishing process rather than attempting generalized support and training. There's a handful of folks out there who actively dislike open access or the repository, but a lot more are well-intentioned and would like to participate and just have it sitting at the bottom of a very long to-do list. And the weekly alert emails serve as specific targeted promotion, even when they don't result in getting a paper, right? Even if someone doesn't send me anything, that's them. Oh, right, the repository exists and it needs specific versions of stuff. And similarly, consistently emailing publishers serves as targeted ongoing advocacy to them, making sure that they know that this is important as well. So thank you. That's it for me for now, and I'm happy to answer any questions folks have.
Me